There is a line in Asia. It is about 250 kilometers long. On one side of this line, people live in a modern country with fast internet, famous food, and K-pop music heard all over the world. On the other side of the exact same line, people live in one of the most isolated, controlled, and secretive countries on earth. These two worlds are not separated by an ocean, they are not separated by mountains or rivers, they are separated by fence, some barbed wire, and a decision made by two men in Washington, D.C. In less than 30 minutes, using a map they had never properly studied. The country is Korea, and the story of how it was divided is one of the most heartbreaking, suspicious, and overlooked stories in all of modern history. Let me take you back to the beginning. To understand how Korea was divided, you first need to understand what Korea was before that happened. Korea is a peninsula, a long piece of land that sticks down from northeastern Asia, with China to the north and Japan across the sea to the east. People have lived on this peninsula for thousands of years. For most of its history, Korea was one country, one language, one culture, one people. The Korean people built magnificent palaces, developed their own unique alphabet called Hangul, created beautiful art and music, and developed a deep culture rooted in family, respect, and community. Korean food, Korean traditions, Korean identity, these things connected everyone on the peninsula, north and south, as one people. For over 500 years, from 1392 all the way to the early 1900s, Korea was ruled by a royal dynasty called the Joseon dynasty. It was one of the longest ruling dynasties in Asian history. The kings ruled from a grand palace in the capital city, Seoul. Life was not always easy. There were struggles, famines, and foreign threats, but Korea remained one unified nation. Then, something happened that would set off a chain of events leading to the tragedy we know today. Japan arrived. In the late 1800s, Japan was rapidly growing in military and industrial power. They looked at the Korean peninsula and saw an opportunity. A strategically important piece of land close to China and Russia, rich in resources. Japan began pressuring Korea, forcing unequal treaties and placing Korean politics under Japanese influence. The Korean royal family tried to resist, but Japan's military power was overwhelming. In 1910, Japan formally annexed Korea. This means Japan declared Korea to no longer be its own country. It was now a part of Japan. What followed was 35 years of brutal occupation. Japan tried to erase Korean identity completely. Koreans were forced to take Japanese names. The Korean language was banned in schools. Children had to learn and speak Japanese. Korean history was rewritten in textbooks. Korean cultural practices were suppressed. Korean resources, rice, metals, timber were taken and shipped to Japan. Korean men were forced to work as laborers for the Japanese military and in mines and factories in terrible conditions. Korean women were taken by force to serve Japanese soldiers, a horrific practice that survivors and their families still speak out about today. The Korean people suffered greatly during these 35 years, but they never stopped calling themselves Korean. They held on to their identity quietly in their homes, in their hearts. And then, in 1945, the Second World War ended and everything changed again. By 1945, Japan was losing the Second World War badly. The United States had dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan was about to surrender, but here is where Korea's story takes a sudden and unexpected turn. The Soviet Union, which is today's Russia, had just entered the war against Japan in Asia in the very final days before Japan surrendered. Soviet troops were now moving rapidly into the northern part of the Korean peninsula, pushing Japanese forces out. The United States was worried. They did not want the Soviet Union to take control of the entire Korean peninsula because the Soviets were communist. They had a completely different political and economic system that America was deeply opposed to. So, American military planners needed to act fast. Two young American military officers, Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel, were given a map of Korea and told to decide where to divide it, so that American forces could accept Japan's surrender in the south, while Soviet forces accepted it in the north. They had 30 minutes. They looked at the map and chose the 38th parallel and the 38th line of latitude running across the peninsula. It roughly cut Korea in half. Seoul, the capital city, would be in the American zone. This line was not chosen because of history, culture, mountains, rivers, or any meaningful connection to Korea itself. It was drawn purely for military convenience by two men who had little knowledge of the country they were dividing. Neither man had ever been to Korea. The Soviets agreed to the arrangement. A temporary line drawn in 30 minutes by strangers in Washington, D.C. would divide a 5,000-year-old civilization. The Korean people were not asked, they were not consulted, they were not even informed. The original plan was that this division would be temporary. The idea was that Korea would be reunified under a single government once things settled down after the war. Korean independence was the goal, but what happened instead was the opposite of the reunification. In the south, American forces set up a military government. They eventually helped establish a government led by a man named Syngman Rhee, who was strongly anti-communist and aligned with American interests. In the north, Soviet forces helped bring a young Korean guerrilla fighter and former anti-Japanese resistance commander to power. His name was Kim Tu-sung. He aligned the northern government with Soviet-style communists. The two halves of the Korea began moving in completely different directions, politically, economically, and culturally. In the north, the state took control of the land, businesses, and media. In the south, a capitalist system developed under American influence. By 1948, both halves formally declared themselves separate governments: the Republic of Korea in the south, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north. Both governments claimed to be true, rightful government of all of Korea. Neither recognized the other as legitimate. A temporary line was quietly becoming a permanent border, and Korean families who happened to be on different sides of it were being separated, with no clear way to know if they would ever see each other again. On June 25, 1950, the tension between the two Koreas exploded into full war. North Korean troops, armed and supported by the Soviet Union, crossed the 38th parallel in a massive surprise attack. They pushed south rapidly, capturing Seoul within just 3 days. It looked as though North Korea might take over the entire peninsula by force. The United Nations, led by the United States, responded quickly. They sent troops to defend South Korea. General Douglas MacArthur led the force. They pushed the North Korean army back all the way to the border with China. But then China entered the war. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops crossed into North Korea to push back against the United Nations forces. Suddenly, the war swung again. More brutal fighting, more lives lost. Seoul changed hands multiple times. The war dragged on for 3 years. It was fought in mountains, in river valleys, in bitter cold, in scorching summer heat. Soldiers on both sides suffered horribly. Entire cities were bombed to rubble. Civilians were caught in the middle, running, hiding, dying. Estimates suggest that between 2.5 and 5 million people died in the Korean War. The exact number is still debated. Many were civilians, ordinary Korean families who had nothing to do with politics or power. And here is the cruelest part of all. Korean families were directly on the opposite sides of this war. Brothers sometimes fought brothers. Fathers were separated from sons. Entire families were torn apart not by choice, but by which side of an imaginary line they happened to be standing on when the shooting started. The Korean War is sometimes called the Forgotten War, especially in the West, because it happened right between the end of World War II and the more famous Vietnam War. But for the Korean people, there is nothing forgotten about it. It is a wound that has never fully healed. In July 1953, the two sides signed an armistice agreement. This means they agreed to stop fighting, but it was not a peace treaty, it was a ceasefire. The war was paused, not ended. Technically, North Korea and South Korea are still at war today. There has never been an official peace treaty signed between them. The 38th parallel was replaced by a new boundary, the military demarcation line, with a strip of land on either side called the Demilitarized Zone or DMZ. This 4-kilometer wide strip of land became one of the most heavily guarded borders on earth, filled with landmines, security fences, cameras, and armed soldiers watching every moment. And on either side of this strip, the two Koreas continue to develop as completely separate countries, growing more and more different from each other with every passing decade. For the millions of families separated by the border, the ceasefire did not bring reunion, it brought silence. Parents who had lost children to the other side, siblings who had not seen each other in years, husbands and wives separated by the wrong side of a border. Most of them would wait decades just for the smallest chance to exchange a letter or a photograph. Some would wait their entire lives and never get even that. Perhaps the most striking way to understand how different the two Koreas became is to look at one single photograph, a satellite image taken at night of the Korean peninsula. South Korea glows brilliantly with light, the lights of Seoul, Busan, and the dozens of modern cities and towns. It is one of the brightest spots in Asia. North Korea, the same size, the same people, the same language, the same ancient culture, is almost completely dark. After the war, South Korea gradually became one of the world's most remarkable economic success stories. In the 1950s, it was one of the poorest countries in Asia. Today, South Korea is a global leader in technology, cars, electronics, shipbuilding, and culture. Korean food, Korean movies, and K-pop music are loved around the world. South Korea has a high standard of living, free elections, and a vibrant society. North Korea took a completely different path. Under Kim Il-sung and later his son Kim Jong-il and his grandson Kim Jong-un, North Korea became one of the most closed and controlled societies in human history. The government controls all information, what people can read, watch, hear, and say. There is no free internet. There are no free elections. There are no independent businesses. The government has invested heavily in nuclear weapons. At the same time that many of its own citizens have struggled to find enough food to eat. A devastating famine in the 1990s is estimated to have killed hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, of North Korean people. Today, the average South Korean lives to 83 years old. The average North Korean lives to 72. The gap in wealth, health, freedom, and opportunity between these two countries, which were one people just 80 years ago, is almost impossible to put into words. Of all the consequences of Korea's division, perhaps the most heartbreaking is this: the separated families. When Korea was divided and when the war ended, millions of Koreans found themselves permanently cut off from relatives on the other side of the border. A husband in the south, a wife in the north, parents in the north, children in the south, siblings who ran in different directions during the chaos and never found each other again. For decades, there was absolutely no communication allowed across the border, no letters, no phone calls, no visits, complete silence between two halves of the same family. Starting in the 1980s, the two governments occasionally agreed to hold brief reunions, allowing a small number of families to meet face to face, often for just a few hours. Elderly grandmothers meeting grandchildren they had never known existed, brothers meeting sisters after 50 or 60 years of separation. The scenes at these reunions are deeply moving. Elderly people, some in their 80s and 90s, weeping as they finally hold the hand of a sibling or a parent they had not seen since they were teenagers, sharing photographs of children and grandchildren, trying to fit a lifetime of missing each other into a few hours. As of today, there are still more than 1 lakh South Koreans registered as separate family members waiting for the chance to meet relatives in the north. Many of them are elderly, many die every year while still waiting. The window for these reunions is quietly closing and the border remains shut. So the question everyone asks is, will Korea ever be one country again? The honest answer is, nobody really knows. Over the decades, there have been moments of hopes. In 2000, the leaders of North and South Korea met face to face for the first time, a historic summit that shocked the world. There were peace talks, cultural exchange, and even a joint Korean team marching together at the Olympics. But these moments of hope have always been followed by collapse. North Korea's nuclear weapons program, its missile tests, and its refusal to open up have made progress nearly impossible. Distrust runs deep on both sides. Experts who study Korea say that reunification, if it ever happens, would be one of the most complex and expensive events in modern history. The two societies are now so different in language evolution, in culture, in economic systems, in basic education, that bringing them back together would take enormous time, money, and patience. Some South Koreans, especially young ones who never lived through the war, say they are not even sure they want reunification. They worry about the cost, the disruption, the difficulty of integrating two societies so completely different from each other. Others, especially the older generation, especially those with family on the other side, say reunification is the only thing that matters. That a people divided is a wound that will never stop bleeding until it is healed. A line drawn in 30 minutes has now lasted over 70 years. Two men with no deep knowledge of Korea, working from a map in Washington, D.C., drew that line to solve a military problem. They did not think about the families it would separate. They did not think about the children who would grow up never knowing grandparents. They did not think about the country they were cutting in half. Korea's story is not just a history lesson. It is a reminder of what happens when powerful nations make decisions about smaller ones without asking, without listening, and without caring about the human cost. The Korean people did not choose to be divided, they were divided by others, and they are still living with that decision today. If this story made you think, please hit that subscribe button because every single day, past portraits bring you true stories from history just like this one. Stories about real people, real events, and the moments that change the world forever. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Korea will ever be one country again? And what story do you want to see next? I'll see you tomorrow with another story you won't forget.